principal, since the very first principal of Roundere High School. He's going to tell us about his his World War II. He's going to tell us about what happened in World War II and like what he did and stuff like that. If you go to the football field, his name is there. So give a round of applause for
Thank you, Isaiah. It's nice to be back here. After 58 years away from this place, it's very, very nice to be back. Just so happened that we opened the school in 1957, so that's a long time ago. And looking over you students now, I think of your world today compared to my world about 94 years ago. What a difference time makes of all of us. Your world today is your home, the city, the school, and don't leave home without it, your cell phone, your iPad, and that. You have the world in your hands. You have the world in your hands for all information. My world was the farm in northern Wisconsin. A little farm, we were poor, we had nothing, no indoor plumbing, no electricity, no phones, no radio, no newspaper. Our world was our neighborhood farmers. That was it. I went to Ashland High School, graduated from 8th grade. There were 6 of us, that's all. One room rural school, one teacher, about 40 students in the room. Going to high school now with a class of about 165 was a great transition for me. And from high school to college, wow, that was out of this world. That was something totally unheard of in the world that I grew up in. In college then, the big date that came, and I'm sure that you're aware of it, December 7th, 1941, as proclaimed by then President Roosevelt, the day of infamy. We were listening to the radio in a house on campus when the news broke. It was horrifying to hear Japanese bomb Pearl Harbor. The next day, we enlisted. A lot of my friends enlisted in the Army, Navy, Coast Guard. Huge waiting lines. There was a line off to the side. It said U.S. Marines. I told my buddy and myself, I said, let's go over there. The line is shorter. That's how it came about that I enlisted in the Marine Corps. After I enlisted, they sent me to school. Then from school to boot camp, Parris Island, South Carolina. And that was an experience in itself. Boot camp was no pleasant place to be. They put us through every imaginable drill that was possible. But we survived. It wasn't that bad. We did survive. From boot camp, they sent us to Quantico, Virginia for officers training. That wasn't quite as strict, but it was bad enough. From there, they sent a couple of us that qualified to Harvard University and Massachusetts Institute of Technology for the study of electronics. Now, electronics was just coming into being at that time. There was no television, but in Massachusetts, MIT for short, they were just beginning to study the transmission of data on a screen. And there we studied radio, radar. Radar is an acronym for radio direction and range. They were preparing us to be communications officers in the Marines. We finished Harvard and MIT, and we were sent overseas. We sailed out of San Diego Harbor via Hawaii, and then to the Marshall Islands in the Pacific. Now, I need a couple of hands to help me to hold up a map. Can I have a couple of volunteers? Okay, come on up. Yeah, come on up, Isaiah. Hold. Take this map here, this is right here. Okay, you on the other end. Yeah. Get in front of them over here, then students can see. We sailed aboard ship to the Marshall Islands. Now, this is the map of the world. The Marshall Islands, I'll come over here. Over here, I think you can hear me. The Marshall Islands are over here, just northeast of Australia. There's Australia. Here's Japan proper. Here's China, etc. Northeast of Australia are the Marshall Islands. In the Marshall Islands, we landed on the island of Kwajalein. Now, ironically, this morning when I picked up the paper, the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, on the front page was a picture of an Army person. He was on Kwajalein with the Army when they invaded the island of Kwajalein. Kwajalein was a well-defended island by the Japanese. They captured the island of Kwajalein, and it was known as Execution Island. And the reason that it was called Execution Island or Death Island, very, very few of the military personnel that were captured there by the Japanese as prisoners of war escaped or lived to tell their story about their time on Kwajalein. The names of those executed were marked on a wall in one of the barracks on that island. We landed there. We stayed there for about a week because it was not conducive to what we were doing. I was attached to a fighter squadron, Marine Corps fighter squadron, with 24 planes, the F-4U Corsair plane. It was a fighter squadron. So from Kwajalein we went to the Eniwetok Atoll. That was still in the Marshall Islands group. Eniwetok Atoll was an atoll by itself with about 20 little islands in a circle. We landed on the island of Engebi, very, very small island. For our planes, we had to extend the runway out into the ocean so the planes could take off. I was assigned as communications officer of the squadron, what we called VMF 113 number. My job was to keep the communications, the radio, the radar, telephones, all operable, especially the radio, because the pilots had to communicate with each other, and they had to communicate with the lead plane, which was the commanding officer of our squadron. So communications had to be ideal. And every time they went on a mission, we had to change the frequencies, etc. We had to make sure that the radar was working. I had about 20 young men, and some of those men probably weren't much older than some of you kids sitting here in the audience this morning. They were young men in charge of technology, radio, radar. Now, the mission of our squadron was to bomb certain islands in the Caroline group. The Caroline group, as you can see on the map, I know it's hard to see, but it's just west of the Marshall Islands. And in the Caroline group was the island of Truk and the island of Pohnpei. Our job, and I'm talking now about the pilots in our group. I was not a pilot. I was a ground officer. Their job was to bomb these two islands to neutralize the Japanese who were entrenched in those islands. And no matter what island that we went to bomb, the Japanese were entrenched in caves. They had caves all over the entire island. But the job of our squadron was to neutralize those islands. Now, you would think that, all right, these are fighter pilots, fighter planes, that what are they doing carrying bombs? Our ordnance lieutenant would bomb these fighter planes with 3 500-pound bombs. They also carried 4 machine guns mounted in each wing. 50 caliber machine guns, and there were 8 of them, 4 in each wing, plus 3 500-pound bombs. When they came back, the bombs were gone. The shells for the machine guns, 50 calibers, they were all empty. They had to reload. We had to change the frequencies and everything. That was on the island of Engebi. We stayed there until some of the other islands, as they were being captured, became available to us so we could put our planes on those islands. And the first island that was assigned to us was the island of Iwo Jima. Now, Iwo Jima is located in the Volcano Island, and that again is north of where we were and south of Japan. Iwo Jima was typically a volcano. It was nothing but volcanic ash. We were supposed to land there February 1st, but we couldn't. The island was not secured. Very, very intense fighting. The Marine Division was there, the Army Division was there. They landed, they tried to secure the island. They told us that the island would be secured in about 30 days. Well, it wasn't. It took about 90 days to secure the island. We couldn't land on the island of Iwo Jima, but we were supposed to land there and occupy an airstrip. And from that airstrip, then, the pilots could intercept the Japanese planes, the Zeros. They had the fighter squadron with planes of Zeros. So it was the pilot's job then to intercept their fighter squadron. So the B-24s that were stationed in Tinian, which is also south of Japan, south of Korea, they were in another island group. They took off from those islands, but the Japanese Zeros would intercept them and try to knock them out of the air. They were the B-29s and B-25 super bombers. Now, we couldn't land in Iwo Jima, so we had to go back to Engebi. The war kept on. Iwo Jima was secured. The war started there, broke out February 19, 1945. From there on, we said, well, then they said, there's going to be the invasion of Okinawa pretty quick. Now, Okinawa is in the Ryukyu's chain. That is just south of Japan. If you can see Japan on the map there, just straight south of Japan is the Ryukyu's island group. And the island of Okinawa there, which was very, very heavily fortified. So they sent us again on a mission to occupy an airfield on Okinawa. As strange as it may sound, the invasion of Okinawa took place April 1st, 1945, Easter Sunday. Easter Sunday, April 1st. We couldn't get in. The fighting was so intense. Out in the bay of Shimuwan, off the coast of Okinawa, was a fleet of U.S. Navy ships. There were battleships out there. The Wisconsin was out there. The Missouri was out there. There were aircraft carriers. There were destroyers. There were landing ship tanks. The greatest fleet of armada that I had ever seen in my lifetime, shelling Okinawa. We couldn't get in. We were forced to land on a small island on the north side of Okinawa called Aishima. It was a small island. We landed there, and of course the first thing we did, we built a bunker. In case we were bombed or anything, we had a bunker to crawl into. We landed there. We called for our planes from Enjabi. They flew into the island of Aishima, and fortunately, all 24 planes arrived safely. Now, Okinawa was well fortified. We were on Aishima, just a few miles south of the southern island of Japan, which was Kyushu. Okay, now we'll pick up another map here. Oh, I forgot, if I have help here, if you're going to help a Marine, you got to look like a Marine. Here we are. Put this helmet on. This was a pilot's helmet. Put this on. There you go. There you go. Pull it down tight. Put your goggles on. You got to look like a Marine and act like a Marine. You too. Here's the cap. Put the cap on. Here's my old Marine Corps jacket. Put that on. You gotta act the part. There you go. Now, button it up. You look better. Button it up. There, that's good. Oh, now you can hold up the knife. We have it right? Not upside down. No, that's good. Okay, now they look the part of a Marine. Keep your cap on, so look, that's good, very good. Now, as long as you look the Marine, you've got to play the part of a Marine. You've got to stand up straight and attention. That's it, very good. Very, very good. We were now on the island of Aishima in Okinawa, which is just south of Japan, and there's the big map of Japan there. Just south of the southernmost island of Japan, which was Kyushu. On the island of Aishima, almost every night, Japanese bombers would fly over us and drop what we called anti-personnel bombs. Now, an anti-personnel bomb is one that explodes a couple 100 feet above the ground. It shatters like a grenade, and all of that hot steel shrapnel rains down on the people occupying the island. We were bombed. We had a good bunker. We could feel the shrapnel, the fragments of the bomb, striking our bomber. We lost personnel on Aishima. We lost young men, 16, 17, and 18 years old. It wasn't a picnic. We lost pilots who tried to intercept the Zeros. Their job, the pilot's job, was to intercept the fighters of Japan, their Zero planes, before they could intercept our B-29 and B-25 bombers. The B-29s were flying out of Tinian, just south again of the southern island of Kyushu. the young men that we lost, again, it was a shame to lose these young lives. Okinawa was a fireplace. The U.S. Navy, the planes, the B-29s, the B-25s, the ships that were sitting out on the harbor kept bombing Okinawa. The Japanese were well entrenched. They were not moving. The northern part of Okinawa wasn't that well entrenched. The Marines' 4th Division landed there and occupied the northern part of Okinawa, and then they moved south to help the Army. What the Army saw, though, was very little resistance in the southern part of Okinawa at the very start. But then they ran into the big resistance of the Japanese entrenched into the caves. And there again, the total amount of personnel lost between Iwo Jima, there were probably over 10,000 U.S. men lost there, over 20,000 Japanese. They were secured in the caves. The U.S. Marines that invaded Iwo Jima used the flamethrowers and went into the opening of the cave, turned on the flamethrowers, and ironically, those Japanese disappeared in those caves, either died of the heat, smoke inhalation, or were burned to death. Okinawa, the same thing happened there. 12,000 U.S. soldiers died on Okinawa. 25,000 Japanese were killed and died on Okinawa. The ironic part of Iwo Jima and Okinawa was when the Japanese were losing the war in those two islands, there were probably as many suicides by the Japanese as there were actually killed by the American soldiers. The reason for that was that they had great pride in the emperor. If they lost the war to the emperor, that would be tragic. They would lose face. They did not want to lose face, so they committed suicide. So there were as many suicides committed there by the Japanese as there were by the American troops. That was the biggest battle of the Pacific there, of Iwo Jima and Okinawa, plus all the rest of the islands. Now, when the island of Okinawa was secured, then we moved from Aishima to Okinawa. Now, Major Williams, who was the major of our outfit, asked me if I would set up camp on Okinawa. Well, the only answer I had was, yes, sir. He asked me, do you know how to operate a bulldozer? I said, yes, sir. I never operated a bulldozer in my life, but you'd never say no, sir, to your commanding officer. It was always, yes, sir. Born and raised on a farm, I operated a lot of machinery, so I thought it can't be that difficult to operate a bulldozer. So then he asked me, can you operate a road grader? I said, yes, sir, again. That was my standard answer. He said, I want you to go to Okinawa and set up camp for the entire squadron. I said, yes, sir, I can do that. I said, give me about 12 men. I took my whole crew, 12 men, went to Okinawa and set up camp. So then we secured the airfield on Okinawa, on Shimu-1, and from there we flew the airplanes. We lived through a typhoon on Okinawa. The typhoon got so strong that the pilots sat in their airplanes. We tied their wings to trucks and tractors and other big equipment to keep them from blowing away. And we salvaged all of our planes. We didn't lose a single plane. The objective of the fighter squadron from Okinawa was to bomb the island of Kyushu, the southernmost island of Japan. On the southern island of Japan, Kyushu, there was an airfield there called Sasebo Airfield near the city of Sasebo. Sasebo was on the northwest corner of the island of Kyushu. You can see the island of Kyushu, the southernmost island of Kyushu, is right down here. Sasebo was a pretty good sized city. The objective of our fighters was, number one, intercept all Japanese Zeros so they couldn't attack the B-29s flying out of Tinian and by now Iwo Jima. The objective of securing those islands was to secure the airfields, because once the Army, the Marines secured the airfield, then we could fly the big planes, the big bombers to bomb Japan and the island of Kyushu. Now, and again, our objective was then to neutralize the kamikazes so they could not bomb us with their anti-personnel bombs on the island of Okinawa. And between the Army Air Force, the Marine Air Force, the Navy shelling of all of with the big ships and everything, the island of Kyushu was pretty well neutralized. Now, pretty soon, it was time for some big news. My radio operator, who was a young man, 18 years old, was in charge of receiving air code, communication code, from headquarters. He didn't let anybody know, nor did anyone know, but something big was going to happen in the bombing of that southern part of Japan. And that big was the atomic bomb. The first city that was bombed was Hiroshima. That was north of the big city of Sasebo on the southern island of Kyushu. Hiroshima was bombed, you probably remember the date, August 6th, 1945. The name of the bomb, Little Boy. The Air Force had that marked on the bomb, Little Boy. It destroyed the city of Hiroshima. Nothing left to it. A few chimneys left standing. Everything was melted. Totally. Destruction. Over 40,000 people lost their lives by the action of one bomb. August 6th, 1945. Pilot by the name of Tibbets was in charge. He was in charge of flying the plane, but the bombardier was the one that took over the plane, actually flew the plane, and dropped the bomb. 3 days later, the headquarters thought maybe the Japanese would surrender after the first bomb was dropped. They didn't. August 9th, 1945. The second bomb was dropped on the city of Nagasaki, and that was just across the bay from the city of Sasebo. August 9th, 1945. Between 40 and 50,000 people. They named that bomb Fat Man. There was Little Boy and Fat Man. I don't know if you can imagine, again, between 40 and 50,000 people losing their lives instantaneously, not from fragments. The heat of the bomb melted everything, including the people. We thought Japan would surrender immediately. They didn't. So they were informed that we would keep bombing with atomic bombs. They surrendered August 15th, 1945. The United States didn't have any more atomic bombs, but the Japanese thought we did. They surrendered. Hiroshima, the Emperor of Japan called a cessation of all flights, all enemy activities. Then on the last part of August, we sailed to Kyushu, the southern island of Japan, and established a base at Sasebo, or sometimes called Sasebo. We took over the airfield there that the Japanese kamikazes flew out of. And there then we were assigned as the occupational forces of Japan. We stayed there. Finally, the official surrendering took place. September 2nd, 1945, on the battleship Missouri. The surrendering of the Japanese to the Pacific commander, General MacArthur, was to take place on the battleship Wisconsin. And now you're probably wondering, why didn't it take place on the Wisconsin? History. Roosevelt was the president. He passed away. Harry Truman became president. Harry Truman was from the state of Missouri. And he gave the orders that the signing of the Declaration of Surrender was to take place on the battleship Missouri. That left out the battleship Wisconsin. We stayed on the island of Kyushu as the occupational forces. The Japanese people were very good to us. We visited many homes. We always went in a group. Anywhere from 2 to 4 of us went in a group. We saw theater presentations by the Japanese. We visited homes. We had dinner with some of the people in their homes. We had a great time. Now, they always served hot sake. Sake was a Japanese wine. Am I running out of time?
Yeah, I'm sorry. We gotta go pretty soon here, so,
How much time do I have?
I think Tasha wants us to go like pretty much right now.
Okay, all right.
So if you could, just
Okay,
a few more
I've got
minutes
it.
to wrap yourself
I've
up.
got it, but just a little story about drinking hot sake. Sake was a Japanese wine. And after a couple of those hot wine drinks, You know how we felt. We were in pretty good mood by that time. I have to leave. I'm sorry I don't have any time for questions. I know a lot of you have questions on it. But from there we sailed home, came home to another world, and I was immediately employed as a teacher. I taught mathematics and physics at a small high school in northern Wisconsin. From there I came to Brown Deer and became the principal of Granville High School, which is now Brown Deer High School. So it's nice to be back to where I started. Thank you. I have some flyers up here. And if some of you are interested in flyers, you can take them or you can ask your teacher about them. But if you want to help you, they're on the stage up here, some flyers, so you can take one if you want. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
5 after 12. You guys should be going to lunch right now. Make sure you're backing your hip by